WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has won a victory in his battle against extradition to the United States. He has been given the right to appeal by London's High Court, which ruled this morning that Assange can challenge his removal from the United Kingdom to the United States. The decision is seen as a milestone for press freedom and the protection of journalists. Protesters showed up to the High Court this morning calling for Assange to be freed. Assange is trying to avoid being prosecuted in the United States on espionage charges over the publication of thousands of classified documents. He is wanted for 17 counts of violating the United States Espionage Act, obtaining secret military documents, and conspiring to hack a Pentagon computer network. If he is convicted, he could face 175 years in prison.
The High Court granted Assange a temporary reprieve in March and gave the American government 3 weeks to provide satisfactory assurances that he would receive a fair trial, that his First Amendment free speech rights would be protected, and that he would not face the death penalty. But today's ruling will delay any extradition of Mr. Assange.
All right, so we've been speaking about this a little bit optimistically in the last few weeks. There was that sort of off-the-cuff remark from Joe Biden that seemed like a positive sign here. But given how difficult this process has been for years, I do think there was some hesitation to really think that there was going to be a good outcome here. So how much should we be reading into this as the beginning of a more positive path to freedom for Julian Assange?
So, I mean, obviously, it's a victory rather than defeat in itself, in that he could have faced more or less immediate extradition, and now he does not. Now he has the capacity to appeal that ruling. I think the danger for Assange is simply the fact that within this whole scope of massive amounts of documents and information being brought to public attention, and the genuine journalistic intent that can be portrayed behind those, there has always been this charge that he helped Bradley Manning actually hack into classified information. And the argument has always been that that is him crossing the line from journalism into something else, including illegality. So that's where the argument remains. The Biden comment, though, that you referenced was interesting, because if people haven't been following the ins and outs of this, it seemed, I think, to open the door to charges being dropped if Julian Assange would go back to his native Australia. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of sentiment that we haven't typically seen from the American government on this issue. So it's interesting that on top of that, or in quick succession to that, we now have this ruling in London.
Yeah, I don't want to be overly cynical here, but a part of me does wonder if this was just too much for the Biden administration to take on. When he's involved in so many unpopular news cycles, whether it's Gaza, whether it's inflation, I mean, whether it's just the recent polls showing him down in 6 out of 7 of these, or 5 out of 6 of these swing states. Do you really also want to be catching flack for not just kind of cracking down on pro-Palestinian protesters, but also kind of extending your reputation of being hostile to speech efforts by prosecuting a case against Julian Assange in the middle of an election year, when there have been a number of Republicans who've said they support the freeing Assange? You know, do you want to continue to make this a partisan issue? Do you really want to take that on when you're already facing this uphill battle? It's also worth noting that this doesn't mean that Assange, of course, is free. Julian Assange points out this morning on Twitter, following the news, quote, "I'm always glad when Assange has a legal win against the U.S.'s dangerous attempt to drag him to the U.S. to prosecute him. But the fact that he will still wallow in a high-security prison, more than 10 years in captivity for no conviction other than bail jumping, is sickening." And I do think that perspective is worth noting.
I think that perspective is worth noting. I would say, though, in electoral terms, I wonder actually about the potency of the Assange issue one way or another. Before we had this discussion, I had to re-familiarise myself about, so this is about Bradley Manning, and then there's the separate DNC thing, and there's so much water has gone under the bridge since then. Now, I take the point, of course, that Assange has been in confinement for all that time, including that long stint at the Ecuadorian embassy in London, which was rather bizarre. But, I think there is a free speech movement that is not limited to progressives that finds the treatment of Julian Assange appalling. I also think there are people who are kind of centre ground, maybe conservative-leaning voters, who kind of think, oh, that guy was involved in stealing our secrets, screw him, basically. So, do you think Assange is definitely the pro-Assange camp is definitely the electorally stronger one.
I do. I think that the kind of voter that is frankly both fleeing the Democratic Party and the Republican Party and ending up in this sort of RFK Jr. zone is a pro-Assange voter. It's the kind of person who's concerned about warrantless wiretapping, it's concerned about NSA overreach, is concerned about FISA overreach, is very skeptical of the government's surveillance wing and the way that it has been turned on the American public. It's very skeptical of our military adventurism and is basically more isolationist in its view. And it sees this, among other things, as that kind of overreach. I think that there is a good argument about the hypocrisy of Chelsea Manning, formerly Bradley Manning, having had her charges commuted, the person who actually did the stealing out free, while the journalist who reported on the stealing is behind bars. And I think as time goes on and some of the narrative arguments that were used to, I think, detract from, I think, the underlying journalistic value of what Assange did, the kind of personal attacks, some of the accusations around sexual assault that existed at a certain time have now very much faded from public memory. And so if this does become a central issue again, because the man has been literally extradited to the United States and is here on American soil and a trial is proceeding, I think a lot of people do stand to look very bad to be saying that they're for democracy, that this is a race for democracy against Donald Trump and fascism, when you are litigating this very high-profile case against one of the most important journalists, I would argue, of the contemporary era. Not to mention that Trump has demonstrated a willingness to be very opportunistic and flip-flopping on his views when it comes to the TikTok ban, let's say, or some of this FISA stuff. He kind of understands what the social currents are, and I would not be surprised to hear Donald Trump come out very strongly as saying, I'm the pro-Assange candidate, I'm the free Assange candidate. Look at this guy who's a complete and total hypocrite in the White House saying that he needs to win the election to protect democracy and press freedoms, but he won't say a mumbling word about Julian Assange.
I think that might be right. I'm just not as certain as you are that it's right, because I wonder if alongside that current of opinion that definitely exists, that is opposed to surveillance, that believes the government is essentially up to no good, that believes the government is constantly infringing on our rights, that clearly exists. There is also clearly a body of opinion that is a more traditional pro-military, pro-American power patriotism in inverted commas, who just don't like Julian Assange and don't think that they would not really be supportive of what they would see as letting him off.
Let's say you're right. Who do those people vote for?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I assume the majority of them vote for Trump.
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
So either way, if you're Biden, you're up the creek.
Yeah, you are. No, exactly.
So either you have pro-war people who are going to not vote for the Democrat regardless.
Right.
The kind of classic establishment Republican.
Sure.
They might not love Trump, but they like him better than Biden. Or you have these more independent people who are these, Obama to Bernie to Trump voter types who were attracted to the outsiderness of the Trumps and the Bernies, who were attracted to people who were willing to be critical of American power. And that, I think, that is the gettable quantity here. That's the swing voter that's been bouncing all around and has become increasingly elusive for Joe Biden as he doubles down on Israel and doubles down on a kind of establishment politics that, again, doesn't win him any favors with establishment Republicans and is also losing him a lot of respect and votes from younger and more diverse Democratic-based voters.
Yeah, I do take that point. I do take the point that there is a real question about, is Biden burning the people who might vote for him in pursuit of people who are never going to vote for him? So we've got all that to think about.
All right, stick around. More Rising coming up next.